What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Enjoying the Review. I'm your host, Incomparable Zach Jones, and it's that time of the week again, time to break down yet another episode of Severance. So today I will be reviewing and recapping Severance Season 2, Episode 6, entitled Attila. Before I get into things, guys, I want to remind you to please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Leave thumbs up, comments, positive reviews. If you prefer, you can also listen in audio form on your podcast catcher of choice. And if you like, you can follow me on social media on Twitter and Blue Sky at Zach Jones Live. That's ZachJonesLive. All right, guys, let's get into it. So yet another great episode of Severance. I think much like the last episode, instead of getting a really huge revelation this episode, this was again yet another episode more of setting up dominoes that are gonna fall down and pay off later. But also I think this episode has some really great character moments as well. I think I would give this episode an 8 out of 10 probably. I mean, like I say, it's always tricky rating episodes of television, but I mean, so far Severance has not missed. I've enjoyed every episode quite a bit. And we did get one, however, I think cool revelation this episode. And I think that's what I want to start off talking about. So full spoilers right off the bat here. So during this episode, Irving, Audi Irving meets Audi Bert. And it definitely seems that Audi Bert is, not what he seems, perhaps was originally presented to Irving. It definitely seems like he's in it with Lumen, and he's a villain of some sort. So we find out, Irving meets with him and his husband, now played by John Noble, which is different than season 1, which is something I want to talk about as well. And during that conversation, Fields, John Noble's character, mentioned something like, that Bert's been working for Lumen for 20 years. And Irving mentions, wait, hasn't the severed process only been around for 12 years? And then towards the end of the episode, Bert tries to kind of cover that up, saying, oh, yeah, I think Fields' memory, or, he was drinking too much, was a little fuzzy, I think we're going to find out that maybe Bert, invented or contributed to Severance the Severance process in some way. I'm not sure exactly. And I also kind of wonder if we're going to find out that Bert was pulling a Helena the whole time, and maybe there wasn't actually an any Bert. Maybe he was going down to the severed floor, unsevered as well. I don't know. That's just a conjecture on my part. But yeah, let's talk about the recasting as well. So this might be nothing. So we got just a quick glimpse in season 1 of Bert with his husband, and that was a different actor than John Noble, who was in this episode. Now it might just be a thing where we got a quick glimpse of that character in season 1, and then when they wrote season 2, they were like, oh, we want to do more with that character, and we'd like to have a bigger name actor, so they got John Noble. And it might just be a recast, and that's it. But a part of me thinks even if they did recast for that reason, the writers of the show are canny enough that maybe they would fold that into the storyline. Because I think it would be interesting. What if Fields was maybe severed or something, and maybe the other guy was severed as well or something, and so Bert has multiple husbands or something, right? And they don't necessarily even completely know it or something. There could be a weird twist like that. I'm just throwing stuff out there that's probably not the case at all. But like I said, it could be just as simple as, hey, we we wanted to do more with this character and we wanted a bigger name actor. It could be totally that simple, and it's that's actually, Occam's razor, probably the case, but it is fun to conjecture, and I think they could do something interesting with that. But yeah, I think that was the big revelation of this episode or the intrigue of this episode was just what is Bert up to. And also the other thing is, while Irving was at the meeting with Bert, it seemed like Mr. Drummond was at Irving's house going through his thing. So it seems like maybe there was, it seems like there was collusion between Bert and Drummond while this was going on, to me. But I will say there's been a lot of like little things on Severance that I didn't pick up on, little clues and hints that I heard other people talk about after the fact, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably something I should have picked up on and didn't. So Severance is one of those shows where they definitely, put in very minor details that are usually relevant in some way, which is, it adds to the show and probably will make for a fun rewatch one day. And then we just got, I think, some good character moments with the basic team, Marc, Helly, and Dylan. I thought got some good character moments. And Mr. Milchick as well. His character is altering in an interesting way as well, which I'll get into in the recap. So yeah, guys, let's get into it. Let's get into the recap of the episode and the details here. So it opens, of course, the last episode ended with Marc, getting the old reintegration vision and very briefly seeing Gemma. And so he's kind of, struggling to still getting any Marc's memories, and he's talking to the doctor about it, his memory of any memory of seeing Gemma. And he asked the doctor, does he know what they're doing, or does she know what they're doing with Gemma? And she basically says she doesn't know, but whatever it is, they find her to be essential to what they're doing. Marc seemed upset because in the memory, it was like, Gemma was looking at him but didn't recognize him. And the doctor assures him that the Gemma he knows is still in there, and, telling him that, one day they're going to get her out of there and they'll be together again. So Dylan, okay, this I found interesting as well. So back at work, Dylan tells the others about the dark hallway and the elevator. And even one of them says, like, oh, maybe that's where they're holding Gemma. Because, of course, as an audience, that's kind of all what we think, right? We saw in season 1, we saw Gemma go down the elevator. And so we all figure, once they find that spot, that's when they're going to find her and possibly, others that are being manipulated. But like the fact that they just laid it out like that almost makes me think like they're trying to subvert our expectations, and maybe that's not exactly what they find at the bottom of the elevator. But it's interesting that they already kind of put that together, He tells them about Irving's drawing with the directions and that he left it behind the poster. And he says he left it, there because he really doesn't want to get in trouble right now. And I think Helly kind of presses it on like, why, why don't you want to get in trouble or whatever? And he just kind of doesn't say, and he walks off. Of course, we know it's because he wants the visitation rights with his Audi's wife, So Marc in the office starts having his reintegration vision flicker again, and we kind of see the office like break room kind of turn into his living room at home. Which was interesting. There was one moment where like maybe I didn't see it exactly right, but it seemed like maybe there was like both a fish tank in the break room and at his work. And this is interesting too, because I know a lot of people have hypothesized that in the episode 4 that takes place, outdoors, that maybe that whole environment was a simulation, which very well could be. And like, if that's the case, could it be that like even when Marc's outside, it's in some way a simulation? That'll be the big like revelation of this series. I don't know. I kind of don't think so. But there definitely could be an element of that. I'm not sure. So now we get a scene between Milchick and Miss Wong, a kind of a tense scene between them. And he tells her that she cannot graduate from her fellowship at the company until he deems her wintertide material. Now, I have no idea what that means. I don't think that has ever been something that's been referenced in a prior episode, to my knowledge. So just more mystery peppered in. So he doesn't explicitly call her out here, but we found out when he did his performance review that the guy said, "Oh, we received, anonymous complaints about you doing these things." And it's like, he's not around a lot of people, so he definitely is like, the implication is he believes, and I would assume rightfully so, that Miss Wong is the one that told the committee about all of his issues with like using the big words and paper clipping things wrong and such things. He tells her that he will be busy for the day and that she has control of the severed floor, but he kind of puts her in her place, and he's like, "You can continue to use your work desk. Like, you can't use my office," or whatever, that kind of thing. And he tells her that he's looking forward to, working on the things he had issues with in his performance review. And so that's kind of what he'll be doing during this episode. So now we get a scene between Marc and Helly. He tells Helly about Seth, or Milchick, threatening him in the elevator in the previous episode. But he also comes clean and tells her that while they were on the outside excursion, him and Helena had sex. And, he's very apologetic, says, he didn't obviously know that it was Helena. And he tries to like comfort her by like holding her hand, but she kind of pulls that away because, obviously she feels, rightfully so, very violated. And so she kind of says, she's going to go for a walk, clear her head, basically. So we get a scene where Milchick organizes 2 very large stacks of paper with paper clips, because he literally is working on paper clipping things correctly, from a performance review, which is interesting. So now Dylan has a meeting with his Audi's wife, and it's their reactions are kind of sweet, but interesting character moment here, because we definitely get the sense, and even more so in a scene later on, we get the sense that Dylan's wife, in a way, is more attracted to this like more naive, innocent version of Dylan than her, quote unquote real husband outside Dylan, who's, had more, the outside Dylan seems less driven and maybe affected by life experiences than inside Dylan. So that's kind of an interesting thing. But inside Dylan expresses sorrow that him and her can't be together all the time, and he asks if he can have another hug from her, because it's something he really hasn't experienced much. We get a scene where Helly is kind of in the hallway sitting in a ball, just kind of processing everything. And we kind of get a montage here that goes between the three characters of Marc, Helly, and Dylan. We see Marc is trying to work, but his head's kind of consumed with the situation with Helly. So he's having trouble working. Marc remembers kissing Helly, while at the same time we see inside Dylan kiss his wife. And then Helly, she starts walking back to NBR, and as she almost gets there, she runs into Marc, who's walking out, trying to find her. So they, similarly, want to find each other and talk. So Marc apologizes, and Helly says she understands, and basically she's just upset with Helena and what she did, and she says basically tells Marc it's not his fault. Oddly enough, Marc is like, do you want me to describe what happened up there? And she says, no, she doesn't want Helena's memory. She wants her own. And she expresses she wants to make love to Marc, and he says, yeah, he would like that, but how? So they find an empty office room that has 4 desks covered by plastic. So they kind of make a makeshift tent covering a couple desks with the plastic, and they go underneath and they make sweet, sweet love, which it's kind of interesting because with them being innies, obviously a part of their brains must retain a basic sense of knowledge that their outside versions of them know. So obviously they know how to talk, they understand the English language, and they must, on some level, they know what sex is, but would have never actually experienced it. So in a way, for Helly, this would have been the first time she ever experienced it, which and for Marc it would only be the second time, although he is kind of reintegrating as well. So, but you know what I mean. So it is kind of interesting. Okay, so Milchek, he wants to, he's trying to not use as many big words. So he's practicing in a mirror. And earlier in the episode, I forget exactly what he told Miss Wong. He something like, you must eschew your childish ways or something. And so now he's trying to say that in simpler terms. So he's like, you need to stop being so childish. And then he's like, you need to grow up. And then he just keeps looking at himself in the mirror and saying, grow up, grow up. And then he changes it to grow, grow, grow. So you almost get the sense in this scene that he's psyching himself up to possibly stand up for himself more and possibly rebel in some way against Lumen. His character is interesting because he seems like the most, in some ways, the most loyal guy. But you see there's cracks in him. You definitely saw that when he got the black paintings and all that stuff. And of course, we don't know exactly what his backstory is, and how he started with Lumen and all that. But I definitely think his character is going to make a choice that puts him at odds with Lumen, because I think we know at some point Cobell is going to come back. And the only way, seemingly, that it makes sense for her to come back to the 7th floor is if Milchick does something that gets him booted. And so I don't know what Milchick will do, but that's part of the intrigue. But we see, like I said, the dominoes are being set up here. We can tell that he's kind of had it in a way with Lumen, and it seems like it's building towards him making some sort of move. So while walking back to MDR, Marc kisses Helly, and he's like, "Oh, your nose is bleeding," but then she notices, no, the blood was transferred from Marc's nose. He's got a bloody nose, and so once again, we get several instances in the show where we can see he's getting sicker from the reintegration. Other scenes of him coughing again too. So he ends up getting a health check from Miss Wong. She's taking his blood pressure and things, and she, he has tissue up his nose and stuff. I think she asks if he has a deviated septum and all this stuff, and he's like, no. But she does ask him if he's experienced any hallucinations. And around that point, Marc starts once again with the reintegration. His vision starts fluctuating between being in that room with Miss Wong and being in his basement with the doctor doing more reintegration stuff. And it was interesting at one time, because at one time he replied to something the doctor said, and Miss Wong seemingly heard it. So it's timeline-wise, what happened first? Is it possible that the conversation with the doctor happened previously to him being in the medical office or whatever with Miss Wong? And the doctor even says here that he may experience basically what feels like gaps in time with the reintegration. The doctor does ask him about the dark hallway, so he must have told that memory to her at some point. And then at some point he struggles to remember anything more, and he starts coughing. So the doctor tells them they need to speed up the reintegration process. So she wants to flood the chip in his head through the hole that was previously, drilled in his head. They didn't really explain this. I don't know exactly what this does. And she'll actually do this towards the end of the episode, but, putting the syringe in his head and, injecting some sort of liquid around the chip in his head. I don't know what that does exactly, but she claims it's going to speed up the reintegration process. But at this time, Marc's refuses. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm hungry. I'm going to go eat. So now we get the scene where Irving shows up at Bert's house, and he meets Fields, who is Bert's husband. So they have this whole conversation because Irving's like, well, what made you decide to get severed? And Bert's like, well, I've done some, he's like, in my past, I've been, he calls himself a scallywag, and Fields is like, yeah, to say the least. He's basically saying that he's done a lot of bad things, maybe overall is a bad person. And he says that, Jesus and his religion is what brought him to being severed, because they had this conversation with their priest or whatever. And the priest said the innies have a soul of their own and have the possibility of getting to heaven. And so basically they say that they figure the outside Bert most likely is going to hell. So the thought was to make it inside, if he got severed, inside Bert could go to heaven with Fields, which is interesting. But again, I do wonder if inside Bert really exists, or if that is kind of a lie. To be determined, I guess. That was an interesting conversation, and I don't know exactly what to make of it. Again, I guess that's the most intriguing part of this episode, just the mystery surrounding Bert and possibly Fields. Fields seems like a genuinely good guy, but you do wonder, like, could he be severed or something like that? A lot of ways they could go with it, I feel. Okay, so now we get a scene between Dylan's wife and outside Dylan while they're, at home at the dinner table with the kids and everything. And his wife just blatantly lies to him about seeing inside Dylan. She says, oh, they had to cancel the meeting. They didn't say why. And she seems annoyed by outside Dylan. And like I referenced earlier, is possibly more in love with inside Dylan. Because outside Dylan kind of seems like a burnout, like, possibly a little lazy, doesn't have the drive that she would necessarily be attracted to. But inside Dylan, like I said, he's more innocent, but also more driven and hardworking, and I think that appeals to her. Also I wanted to mention with Fields, of course, I think it was the beginning of the last episode, the mysterious man that takes stuff down the dark hallway, the export hallway. They made sure not to show his face. And so it makes you wonder, like, could that be Fields? Like, will one of these episodes will Fields maybe show up on the severed floor or something like that, and we'll be like, ooh, what's going on there? I don't know. So Marc goes to a restaurant, and he ends up seeing Helena there. And this was also an intriguing, her motivations for being there. So she introduces herself to Marc, and he says, yeah, I know who you are. Presumably, from the whole kerfuffle with her at the end of season 1, the speech she made. And then, of course, we saw earlier in this season, she had to make a video kind of saying, oh, I'm sorry, alcohol was mixed with my medication or whatever, and I said these weird things, But she apologizes for the OTC at the end of season 1, the overtime, saying that made the innies go outside and everything. She tells Marc she's the head of the company, and she even starts flirting with him a little bit. And, she says, oh, I should bring you home to my father and all this kind of stuff, right? And she tells him that she'd love to hear his experience with the OTC. So in that respect, it seems like she's very, lumen-based, grilling him on, what he might know and things like that. But also, with Helena, we know that she kind of got, maybe sort of a crush on Marc as well, from seeing, from the earlier episodes, and obviously she slept with any Marc. So it seems like she might be kind of transfixed with Marc as well. And so maybe that's part of her, maybe it's not all business as to why she's following him. I did find this interesting. She refers to his dead wife as Hannah, and he corrects her that it's Gemma. And I got to feel that was intentional on her part, that she was testing him in some way. You know, it makes you think she's suspicious that he might be reintegrating. The fact that she threw that out there. Yeah, it was just. What do you guys think? I mean, that's what I got out of it. That because why else would she throw out something like that? It seems like she has to be suspicious that he might be reintegrating, but at the same time, if she is, what has led Lumen to suspect that? You know, it's interesting. I get a lot of interesting stuff this episode. I think I forgot to, in the recap, write down when this happened exactly. But at some point when Irving and Bert were meeting, we saw Drummond take out some keys and enter a place that I didn't recognize straight out the way. But then we get this scene where he's looking through paperwork that has a bunch of information on severed employees. And I'm pretty sure those are the same paperwork we saw Irving's Audi. Well, technically, I guess Irving's Innie looking at when the OTC was going on at the end of season 1. So I believe Drummond is in Irving's apartment or house going through his stuff. And so that what, like I said, makes me think that Lumen and Bert are colluding in some way. So back to Bert's house, Fields wonders out loud if Bert and Irving had sex at work. And he says he's not upset if it did happen. He says that he believes that Innies deserve to feel love. So Marc gets very paranoid after his conversation with Helena at the restaurant, because he's like, she might be on to me. So he rushes home. And tells the doctor he wants to go through with the plan to flood the chip. And so that's what happens. She injects, like I said, fluid around the chip. I don't know exactly how this affects it, but if it speeds up the process, I guess. And Marc, he kind of has instantly has visions of his making love to Helly, so he get those memories. He also has some visions of Gemma's face mixed in there as well. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door, which the doctor tells him to just ignore. But it's his sister, and he's like, "Well, my car's parked there, so she knows I'm here. It's not like I can pretend not to be here." So he goes and he answers the door. And she's like, "Hey, you haven't been talking to me. Like, are you still trying to like retina thing in your eyes?" And she wants to help come up with a plan for him to communicate with his Innie. But he basically tells her, like, don't worry about it. I'm trying my own thing. But he won't tell her what he's doing. But then his reintegration sickness gets really bad. He ends up passing out on the floor. And so his doctor comes rushing in. And so now his sister knows about the doctor. So, we got to assume that probably, the sister is going to now be in on the reintegration. Okay, so now Irving is about to leave Bert's place. And this is, like I referenced earlier as well. Bert tells him that, the husband, he must just be fuzzy in the head. I couldn't have worked for Lumen for over 20 years because, like you said, the severed process has only been around for 12 years. And then it seems like Bert wants to meet privately with Irving. I almost get the sense, though, that they're setting us up to think that Bert, in some way is going to do something to Irving. But I almost feel like outside Irving is smart and might already have it put together. The outside Bert is no good. I just have a feeling like they're going to, flip that on us in a way, and it'll be like, oh no, Irving had it figured out the whole time. Maybe I'm wrong, but I get that sense. But guys, a lot of things to talk about this episode. So in the comments down below, tell me what you think. Maybe some of the ideas I expressed this episode are really stupid. I'm sure they are. Or what you might think about some of the revelations of this episode, and what role Bert plays and everything. But guys, I think that's going to be another episode. So if you will, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also share clips with people. But comments, likes, positive reviews, those all help in the algorithm. So please do that. And like I said, you can also subscribe in audio form on your podcast catcher of choice. And you can follow me on social media, on Twitter and Blue Sky at Zach Jones Live, ZachJonesLive. But guys, until next time, I hope you're enjoying the review. Bye, guys.